Hello, I'm Matt Russell at the University of Minnesota, and I want to talk today about utilizing ash wood and a survey we did that asked forest industry about this. Libby Ring was also a part of this work. Libby was an undergraduate student that did this as a part of an undergraduate research project at the University of Minnesota. And so we'll dive into it. Well, first, you all know that Minnesota has a lot of ash trees. Here's a map. We just did a mapping effort trying to map where ash are located across the state. And this map here shows that we have a lot of ash. It's about 8% of all the trees in Minnesota, but it's a component, at least a significant part of at least 4.3 million acres of forest in Minnesota. So a tremendous resource out on the landscape for this species. When we think about where ash is currently supplied to pulp and paper mills, sawmills, and used as firewood, its overall consumption is really pretty low relative to other species. And so 2 pulp mills use it, about 100 sawmills. It's one of the second most common fuelwood species in Minnesota. And so while an abundant resource, it's not exactly consumed as much as other species across the state. Another way to show that, we can think of ash being the 5th ranked species if we're to look at the total volume of all species in Minnesota, but it's the 9th ranked species in terms of the amount of wood that's harvested of that species. And so on the left we see the total standing volume of all species in Minnesota. Black ash in particular is behind aspen, cedar, red pine, and bur oak. Whereas if we looked at the harvested volume, and these numbers are from 2016, we can look and see that ash is behind all of these other species, from aspen, red pine, spruce, maple, and the whole list is there. And so it's another way of saying that ash is a very abundant species, but not consumed as much as other species. We know that ash also has a tremendous cultural significance to the state and to its indigenous peoples through things like black ash snowshoes, through pack basket making. There's a tremendous amount of value socially with the species. And when we think about the harvest of ash in Minnesota, this is data from Minnesota's Forest Resource Assessment. Looking at the ash harvest, and actually we've been seeing an increasing number of ash harvested in the state since at least 1997. About 29,000 cords of ash wood were harvested in 1997. We can compare that to almost 70,000 cords in 2016. And so it's an interesting comparison there to see the increasing utilization of ash over the last 2 or 3 decades. Well, with that, we're very concerned about ash now because of the emerald ash borer. And so what you're seeing here is an animated document or animated GIF that shows the spread of EAB across the state. And so emerald ash borer was first observed in Minnesota in 2008. And from there, just continuing to increase in terms of where it's found. And so currently it's found across 23 different counties in Minnesota. So most of that has been limited to the Twin Cities Metro and the southern part of the state, but there is a finding just a few years ago in 2015 in Duluth. A lot of concern, especially for our black ash forests that are up north. And so combined with that, with the increasing threat of emerald ash borer, the Minnesota DNR conducted their million cord study with a private consulting group. And one of the outcomes of that was this initiative to harvest more of these species that have these forest insect problems. And so that being ash and tamarack being the other one, with the eastern larch beetle affecting a significant amount of the resource of tamarack in the state. And so the idea here was that in addition to the overall harvest levels that the state had set on their lands, the state would try to harvest at least 15,000 more cords of both ash and tamarack every year to kind of prepare for the oncoming threat that these forest insects have. And so that's a significant amount of resource, a significant amount of potentially new wood that's might be available on the market that otherwise wouldn't be. And so this raises the question, well, if this additional supply is available to the forest products marketplace, how much demand is it by the people that use that wood, the people that produce wood products based on ash wood? And so that led us to start a survey. And so we conducted a survey in late 2019. It was an online survey. We asked 11 questions on ash wood utilization and really wanted to understand what's their concern, what's their knowledge about emerald ash borer. To get the mailing list for this, we used the Minnesota DNR's primary and secondary forest products producer directory. Just a great list of basically forest products companies that are using the wood, that are employing lots of people in different forest products industries across the state. And in total, we received 32 responses. Here are a couple of key numbers from the study. So in total, we had 61% of forest products companies currently use ash species in some manner, but a third of them say that they can't use ash wood. And so maybe the species just isn't right for their operations. Maybe they prefer other species instead of ash. But it just gets to the point that not every company, not every forest products industry will use ash. And just over 90% of respondents reported that ash species were less than 25% of the volume used when considering all species in their operation. And so this meant that while ash is used, it's not used in large volumes, most of it less than 25% of the total volume used by a company. And then we found out that most people were pretty knowledgeable about emerald ash borer, and especially its impacts to Minnesota forests. And so when we asked that question, we saw just a really high value in terms of how knowledgeable people were, 3.47 out of a 1 to 4 scale. And so we knew that, the problems with outreach and getting the message out about the impacts of EAB, forest products industry already knows that, as was evident in this survey. Another thing that we found, this was really one of the key findings, was that our survey results showed really little optimism for future wood markets for ash species. And so one of the questions there, we asked people in the forest products industry, that's what you're seeing here on the left, and then in just regular natural resource professionals, that bar on the right, just how optimistic are you if there are new and emerging wood markets for ash in the next 10 years? And so on a scale of 1 to 5, these rank just around a 2, which meant very slight optimism, borderline not optimistic at all. And so a really important finding here that was shown through the survey. We also wanted to get a sense of, well, if you're not using ash, why not? And so one of the things here was season of harvest was cited as a large reason for not using more ash. And so we can think about that, perhaps relating that to black ash harvesting in some of the northern Minnesota forested wetlands. Those are really restricted to winter-only harvest, and many loggers are really busy in the harvesting wood in winter, and so maybe that relates to that. Maybe there's a limited supply of it. A lot of survey comments came back that maybe it was too small a diameter, most of the ash in Minnesota, and so that was an interesting comment, and maybe that's coming both from kind of the northern Minnesota black ash dominated area, but also perhaps maybe where there are areas with green and white ash, maybe in central and southern parts of the state. Other reasons, some people thought the price of the supply was not what they were looking for. Some people said the quality of wood was a concern, or just not the right species for their products. We also asked, what opportunities might there be for new and emerging markets for ash? And what you're looking at here is a word cloud. And so every word is sized depending on how often it was said in the survey. And so the bigger words indicate more people said those responses. And so we had a lot of interest in ash wood for flooring materials, for pallets, for paneling, OSB, firewood, torrefied wood. Those came as potential markets and potential new and emerging avenues where we might target ash wood in the future. And so some of the implications of this work are that really this lack of markets for ash can, to support forest management treatments for EAB, really limits the ability for managers and communities to maintain healthy forests in the future. And so the idea, if we had strong markets for ash, we might have more of a reason to manage those stands, manage those resources, knowing that they were going to be sustainably managed. We also, another implication, the newer markets are expanding existing products increase the use of ash wood in the future. And so you think about those reasons that people cited, whether it's flooring, to OSB, to torrefaction as a way to potentially use more ash wood. Those are some good ideas that might be out there in terms of marketing ash in the future. And just a quick summary of this, ash is used in Minnesota's forest products industry, but at pretty low volumes. And so it's an abundant tree, but not consumed very much. So we do have opportunities for increasing the use of ash wood in Minnesota, but only slight optimism. There will be new and emerging markets to support it. And so with that, I'll sign off, and feel free, please email me if you want to talk about this anymore. We do have a draft paper that's coming out in the Forest Products Journal. It's not been published yet, but I'll be happy to share that draft with you if you're interested in it. And otherwise, just like to hear your thoughts. Is what you saw here surprising to you? Is it about what you expected? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So my email address is there, and I'm always happy to chat. So with that, thanks for your time, and be in touch soon.